either yourself or somebody that you know within a particular community is suffering or experiencing the kinds of challenges around tech that means that whatever worked previously might not be working now because of changes in work patterns, changes to the business model. And this is an engaging way. What we're going to demonstrate today is an engaging way to find out what the colleagues think, what they think as a team, so that someone maybe in our community can benefit from this. So we could run a session with them and with you, with our support maybe, to engage the team. And I think sometimes organizations shy away from that because they think it's going to take a lot of time, because they maybe don't have the glue or the tools in place to do it. And so I think we're going to demonstrate today that actually we can kind of multitask it, and we can have a group session. And if we have a nice bit of a nice tool in between us, like the digital kit, then we can run that. Now, what I also like to do, and I'm going to introduce James and June, which is, I've been talking to James and June for a while now, a few weeks, and what appears to be happening is some shared values around how we engage with clients in terms of seeing the whole view, the holistic view. And it's really interesting that digital holistics have that in their title. So a more holistic view, a more overall view. So James or June, would you just introduce yourself? Because we're going to collaborate on this today, and it's probably good that people know who you are.
Okay, well, I'll start, and then, do you want to start, June?
No, you carry on.
Yeah, okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm James Knowles. I work with June and a company called Digital Holistics. As Martin rightly says, is look at digital and technical matters holistically. My background has been in IT for nearly 50 years now. So I started off as a programmer in the 70s, basically became an analyst, project leader, head of development for a company called TNT in the 1980s. Went on to be a IT director for a spa wholesaler in the 90s, and then head of development for a EPOS company called ADS Anchor in the late 90s. And then I met June in the early 2000s, and we did some projects using our own technology for companies like British Airways, Dudley Council, Education Board, Northern Ireland. And we realized some of the challenges that we were facing around managing management, if you like, and their understanding of where IT was going and how to get the most out of it. So over the last 5, 6, 7 years, we've spent a lot of time working on methods of being able to introduce and make management aware of both the benefits and pitfalls that IT provides, and how they can maximize the benefits and mitigate the disadvantages. Over to you, June.
Yes, I think James summed that up pretty well. That I spent most of my programming and analysis career in the water industry, and as I went up the ladder, because I was interested in people's comprehension and people's understanding of what was going on, I became the person in our projects that formed the link between the technical teams and the ordinary people. So if any of them were in the position where they were trying to communicate with a technical person and didn't know what they were on about, they would ring me up and say, "Can you come and translate, please, Ju?" and you know, with that in mind, James and I have tried very hard to try and see how people would be shown computing if we all knew now, if we'd known back then what we know now, because obviously a lot of mistakes have been made in the last 40 years.
And what I like about your material and your approach, you always talk about the overall, the holistic view, the need to start with people and the overall view. So you can see how it fits perfectly with big picture. And I'm always into these technology symbols here, which we'll look at today, which you can see hanging behind me. what I've done, and no apologies for this, but when I've gone about simplifying the business so more people can get involved in the conversation, I use this technology symbol to wrap up basically anything technical. So it doesn't matter whether it's database, cloud, telephonics, any form of system or widget or gizmo, I simplify under this technology symbol. And the reason I do that is just because we understand different aspects of technology. It doesn't mean to say when we broaden that conversation, we need to make it any more complicated for the people that we're talking to. And that's what makes what we do really exciting, because it means you can broaden that out and introduce more people into the conversation. And normally, and this is where the work James and June is important, there is a point in the road here which we can go one of two ways. We can either start telling our colleagues or the clients that we're working with how good we are at X, Y, and Z, or what we can do is take a different direction and we can start finding out what their challenges are. So in this business, you've already started adding a few things. What I would like you to do is, you've done it already, you've pulled some tech symbols on, or if you would, place the challenge symbol next to the tech, and maybe just check that you've changed the text on them to mean something for you in your example. So I'd imagine when I look at the board, I've got a technology symbol next to the challenge symbol, and it's in a part of the business that you think is relevant. So I know there are some on there already. If you haven't already, try and bring them on. And I said to Chris earlier, if you're able to just change the text to put your name in there or your initials, then that's quite helpful, because it just shows who has put that challenge down. So I'm just going to leave you for a few minutes. Now, what's interesting, James and June Beddoes, is you might start reading those challenges and becoming a little bit interested in them because of what we're going to do next. So I don't know whether, James, you've got, June, any kind of early views of that before we go any further.
No, I'm just going to start looking at them now, Martin. So give us a couple of minutes and we'll be ready to discuss.
And what I'll do, James, to help you with that, and this is a natural part of the conversation, is that sometimes just leaving a challenge on there with the technology symbol isn't sufficient enough understanding. So I'm going to do two things to help the dialogue continue. What I'm going to do is encourage those people, the rest of us who've put challenges on there, the team, if you like. What I'd like us to do is to encourage us to add another symbol or two. So I'm going to give you some prompts for that. And what that does is it develops a few connections with different things in the business. And then what I'm going to do is probably pick one. And if anyone's happy to describe it, we can just zoom in on that one and work it through. So the first step for that, for the challenge you've put on, or indeed anyone else's, by the way, if you want to comment on someone else's, that would take a nice twist. For the challenge you've put on, think about the team that was involved in that. So the team is the red symbol. So what I'd like you to do is, if not already, is grab one of the red team symbols, either because it's lying around the board or pull it in from the left-hand side. Take the team symbol, place it next to your little cluster, and I hope it's in the right part of the business, because you'll have already placed it. But if you need to move it, you can. And just click on the red team symbol and give that team the name that it was that meant something to you. And that might form part of your story when you're going to offer to tell it, if you will, in a minute. So I can see some lovely connections being made. And what's interesting is you start to generate a little cluster effect. So basically you're making little connections. And I'm going to encourage you to think about a number of different things now, but I won't dwell on them too long, because it is a bit of a rapid fire insight, which is, think about, does that challenge that you've thought of relate to the customer and the customer journey? If it does, move that cluster towards the yellow customer line at the center, because what you're indicating there is that this technical challenge was something to do with the customer. And then I'm going to whiz through another 3 symbols. There's a black symbol, which is the measure symbol, you can see a few lying around, and if you need one, go to the resource drawer. Was there in this challenge, and I'm becoming a bit like Columbo or one of those very popular detectives, I'm going to ask a detective question. Was there a measure that you could relate to that challenge? So if you think of it from the business, what was this challenge stopping happening, or what was it? How could you actually measure or count or report that this was a challenge? So you would have a little conversation around this measure symbol, which you can see hanging just over my shoulder. So that's the measure symbol. So encourage a conversation amongst yourselves about bringing that measure symbol on. And I'll mention two more. One is the money symbol. Was there any money related issue with that challenge, i.e. was it reducing revenue? Was it creating extra costs because it was a challenge? Was it something to do with the fact that you had to pay the supplier of that technology more money? Anything to any connection with money, you would just put it out there and see if that resonated with everybody, anyone. And the last one I'll mention is process. So process is about procedure or ways of doing things, which means you would encourage people to think about that if this was a technology issue, what was the process and the procedure that was causing the issue? And it won't take you long to realize all I have done there is, if you pull out that spanner drawer, what Big Picture is beautiful at doing, in my opinion, but I am a bit biased, is in a very straightforward and simple way, it prompts for the really good conversations based on the symbols that I've chosen. So all I've done is step through the symbols, and you will judge for yourself which of those symbols became more interesting as a prompt and which didn't. So some will be not in any way relevant, and that's a story in itself. Some of the prompts I gave you might spark a thought to think, actually, I thought that was a technology challenge, but actually it was more about process, or it was more about people. And as we know, and as we're going to demonstrate, lots of challenges are a rich connection between different things. And the board, by the way, is looking brilliantly busy and fantastic. So this is where the session plan opens out into expansive mode. We haven't rehearsed this fully, James, but you've been casting your eye across, and I don't want to point or ask anybody in particular to come forward. Is there a particular area of the board, when you zoom in and look, that has kind of created a connection for you in terms of the kind of things that digital holistics can help with? Are there some challenges on there that you recognize, or that are totally new to you?
No, I think we can appreciate all the challenges that people are putting up there, and we can certainly discuss the background to them and a pathway to mitigate or resolve the challenge that people have got. So, you know, I made a list of all of them.
That's brilliant, James. So
what I would say,
what's best to do, maybe, James, is draw our attention to one, and maybe whoever it is might be willing to just describe it and tell their story a little bit.
Okay, bear with me a minute. Let me just. Okay, I'm looking at the one that RC put up there. Tech not prepared for users not ready for it.
Yeah, nice. Now, what I do...
Can you see that? That's in operations.
Yeah, brilliant. Now, what I do that you can do as well, if you like, what I'll do is I'll quickly share my screen without wanting to confuse you. What I do when you say that, I zoom in. So if you can see on Zoom, I've zoomed in, I think, to the area, and that does require a little bit of dexterity, and I've not used that word for a few weeks. A little bit of dexterity to zoom in, and you can do that in the bottom left hand corner. You can zoom in. When I zoom in, it doesn't zoom in for you, and obviously this is a live board, so you can, someone's moving that ROI, which is brilliant. That's how the collaboration works. I'm going to unshare that, but I just wanted to demonstrate you can zoom in to 220 and that means you're more focused on it. I think it goes up to 300, and you just use that little crosshair. So basically we're focusing on this area here. So over to you, James, and I think it's Richard, to just have a chat about that challenge and how you see it, James.
Okay. Well, what I'd like to do, can you, Richard, give us a bit of background to what your challenge actually is and what problems it's causing to you and your organisation?
To be honest, it's not a problem I've got at the moment. It's a problem that I've seen a number of times in the past, and it doesn't sound as if my background is massively different to yours. So you've probably seen this a lot of times. You know, go back 20 or 30 years, and there were lots of people developing systems and lots of analysts and programmers and project managers working flat out to build systems for people. And at some point late in the system development methodology, there will be something about training the users. And I think what I found, and I think many other people found it too, is that it isn't a question of training. It's not about how people use the technology. It's about the fact that if you haven't prepared them for the change that is coming to their working life, they're not going to use it. Or if they are, it's going to be under duress. And so
no, I totally agree with that. That's exactly what we've found, Richard, is that, and I think the initial problem has been that the decisions made by senior management were about getting systems in very quickly at the least cost, and not looking at the bigger picture of return on investment. And getting that return on investment means that all parties to that software or system need to be running at their optimum, and the key people in that are going to be the users, and the users' confidence that they've got what they want, know how to use it efficiently, and want to use it. And as you rightly say, that tended to be ignored. What I would say is that's still very much the case in a lot of places. You know, is that one of the things that Judah himself has said is that you could excuse companies in the 70s and 80s by making poor judgments because they were all first-time footers at that time. We were the pathfinders for this new world. But that's not the case now. But it's still true that people are having foisted on them unsuitable solutions that they've not asked for. What they have asked for doesn't appear. Companies get very annoyed. What they've asked for is always late, in their opinion, and has cost too much. But if they ask the right questions of what return on investment can I get from this solution, how long can I perpetuate that return on investment, because everything becomes obsolete, and the least flexible solutions become obsolete quicker. And if they would never fit for purpose, they're never going to see the light of day and give it any return on investment. Now, the fact is that that's happened many times since 2000. You know, the National Health Service central spine system that cost about £12 billion never saw the light of day. You know, the government quite happily wrote off £12 billion for a solution that was not fit for purpose.
Was that the CSC Fujitsu?
Yes. Yeah. And
the interesting thing about that is that the government broke the contracts for those two organisations so badly, it couldn't get any of that £12 billion back off them.
Exactly right. And that's exactly right, Richard. So it's not just about the software, it is about the suppliers, it's about the contracts. It's about contracts that perpetuate beyond the initial development during the life cycle of that software up to the point and through the decommissioning of it. Because if you don't get them right, all you're doing is handing a lot of ammunition to the software providers to go and screw you forevermore. Yeah. And so the view that June and myself take is that the starting point is to ensure the decision makers are well advised and they're willing to take that advice because a lot of them aren't. Either they don't think they can manage IT and therefore hand over the control to people who may not be looking after the best interests of those people, or they think they know it all and tread in where people with more sense would be more careful.
Nice.
And so I feel the problem starts really at that starting point. And as you rightly say, those users should be part of the process all the way through from the start. Else they're not going to fully understand what they've got. They're not going to fully appreciate what they've got, and probably finish up with what they don't want.
Yeah.
Lovely. So now this is really key. So because of time, we're unable to go into a lot of depth, but what I want to do is to take that, capture it. And what you'll notice, James, as you were talking on the board, I've said educate decision makers just as a kind of text tag to capture it. So what we do with Big Picture, if you notice, if you're following my share on screen, we start with a challenge. So we've gained an insight into the challenge relating to technology in this case. We've had a conversation around it, and then we end with an opportunity. So the conversation gets to a point. Well, what then is the opportunity? So I think we were heading that way with your narrative and story, James. You were able to take Richard's narrative, his story. We're talking with two informed parties here, so it's a slight twist on the thing. Richard obviously knows as well, and you do because you know the project even. But the fact is, the pattern would be, what's the technical challenge? Can you tell me a bit more about it in the lovely way that you said? Can you enrich it with different parts of that story? And then it goes from challenge into opportunity. So I want to do 2 or 3 of these so we kind of practice it. So if I zoom out, it's quite a busy board, and you might do an element of tidying. Are there any other challenges? Is there another one you can pick out that someone has added? What about a CJ? Chris was in there adding a few earlier. Can we pick one of Chris's challenges if we can spot one of them?
I could do the point of sale one. I don't know if that is one of Chris's or is that somebody else's.
That's one. I just added that one as an example. So I don't know if any.
Okay.
If I did one of them as an example. There was one in management and admin efficiency, connecting a remote sales team. That seemed like an interesting one. What a kind of an insight into that? Maybe Chris and then to James.
That's fine. Yeah,
a pre-launch startup that I need to establish a remote sales team, and it's really around the sort of the technology to support them to be able to do their job efficiently. And
that's fine, Chris. Again, picking up from what I said before, the first thing is for yourself to fully understand the full scope of the issues that should be considered while you're making those decisions. So what we have is a process to look at all that. So it is looking at the resources, both financial and skill resources, the requirements that you're looking at, the strategy of the organization, any givens within that. And what I mean by that is that you or your executive team may have certain things that you feel must be a part of it. i.e. some people say, I don't want to use the cloud. We went to an NHS trust last year and they said, no, we will not use the cloud. We don't think it's secure enough. Our view is it is going to be more secure than anything you've got on premise, but you're the boss. So if you say it's not got to be cloud, then it will not be cloud. Some people say if it's cloud, it should be AWS, and other people say no, it should be Microsoft or Azure or IBM. So it's those sort of givens that need to be looked at. And if it's a new venture, then there's going to be potentially no legacy. But if people are looking at reset, then obviously moving from their legacy into the new world is also a big element that needs to be looked at. Yeah. And as I say, the starting point is to, looking at those things, is to work out a schema that will deliver the optimum return on investment, both tangible and intangible benefits, look at the risk to that return on investment, and look at the total investment sink that will be needed before the investment is starting to be paid off. And the other issue is that we live in a very dynamic world today. So timelines want to be very compressed to, again, an optimum point. So it's looking at phasing the project to get you up and running as quickly as possible. And that basically is the starting point. And beyond that, then it's a sort of process of design, development. And the key thing is that executive user committees to make sure there is total lines of communication, always open and always transparent. And I think if you get those things in place, as people say, it's all about people. The technology is really second to it. It's making sure that people are all aligned and feel that they're in control of events. The technology will follow in its wake to a certain degree.
Yeah, no, I love that.
And the big pity is, and the big pity is that people feel it's technology that fails when it's people that fail, and we haven't used the technology appropriately, because technology is fairly dumb. Basically ones and zeros at the basic line.
My read of that, and you can see if you're following my Zoom share, is the way I'm zooming in on things. So what I'm doing is I'm embellishing that picture. So if we were together, what we'd be doing is developing that picture. So it's around the schema for ROI and risk. That's the kind of opportunity. That's where it turns from a negative into a positive. You mentioned money. You mentioned about the process and the phasing. So this is all about taking that conversation from what appeared to just be a challenge and adding to it, annotating it, and taking it forward. And I think that's a second example I'd love to go into more depth in. But I've just done something that I'd like to explore in the time that we've got remaining. And this might be a bit of a risk because, Rachel, I'm not sure what content you've been putting onto the board, but I'd just like, if you're willing, Rachel, I know you've been active in the board, if we just flip it around, was there a challenge or an area of the board that you were developing that you're willing to share with us?
The challenge that I did was the marketing.
Okay. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
I don't know, I was just putting it there because I didn't know really what was the question. I thought everyone was move whatever kind of issue they have and how they would like it
absolutely fixed. And it's fine, Rachel. What happens is, because you were active in the board, I was interested and curious as to what kind of challenge you were working with, because when you're working with a group and opening up the conversation, people work and make connections in different ways. And it's not intended to kind of put you in an awkward position. I'm just interested because I noticed you were active in the board, and it might be that you're playing around, you're adding stuff and you're following along, and that's fine. But it's very big picture like to be curious and interested if there's some value. And if you've been added have you been adding the ABM marketing technology symbol?
I added it, yes.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, for me there is a story. And if James and June were coming in, or we were looking at it from a big picture perspective, to me, that's interesting. Something is going on there. There's something you're making sense of in that marketing space. And we haven't talked about marketing space already. So the point I'm making is by indicating your activity and you're in a nice way playing around and adding things, it looks to me like an area of interest and exploration. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that, or we can pick another one and move on.
What I would add to that is that something that we discussed, the comment, what technology for ABM marketing? And what I would suggest is, don't just look at the technology. You've got to look at the things holistically, as we said, to start off with. So you've got to look at the technology. Now, applications tend to sit on top of what we call the technical platform. And the key thing for marketing, which we haven't discussed yet, is data. Because the driver for your marketing is going to be very much about data of the markets, the sort of information coming out of the markets. And certainly in marketing now is starting to be the trend to use what they call big data. That is data that's basically harvested from work done on the internet to give people a view of potential size of markets, what that market is looking for, what's in terms of cost breaks and the service levels, and etc., etc. And as I say, we haven't talked about data this afternoon, but I think it's the missing element in a lot of people's conversation when they talk about technology. The data is and should be the most valuable asset an organization actually has. But unfortunately, in lots of organizations, it's a wasted asset because people don't know where its provenance and therefore doubt its quality and accuracy. They don't have it structured correctly, so they can't make much use of it in analytical terms. So the sort of Cinderella of ICT, if you're IT, if you like, is data, and it should be the princess of the ICT world. And we should be looking at data as being a prime resource for driving decision making, and marketing is going to be based on that decision making and then follow through with the right procedures and tools to make it happen.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thanks for the sharing. And what's interesting there, whilst Rachel was adding that, even from the text description of that, and maybe let's say we come across a colleague who has a thought, but maybe through technical reasons or whatever is unable to articulate it fully. There's still a connection there, James, that you were able to pick up on and elaborate on. And that broadens the conversation. It uses a seed that somebody has added that may not have had the opportunity to do that. And it's drawn our attention. What Rachel has done for us, she's drawn our attention into the marketing space and raised the term ABM, and that was something you could pick up and talk about and then link it into data. So I think it was a good example. A bit, you know, we don't know how things are going to work, but for me, that's a good example of making a connection. Now, I'd love to go to other examples, and I do try and bring everyone in, and there's loads of good stuff on there, and the conversation can continue. This board can stay open, and we can pull off all of the challenges and, you know, do anything we want with. I want to draw your attention to how you might draw this together if you were working with a really big team. And if you go into that top right of your board, there is an opportunity symbol. Please go into your own board and bring up the opportunity symbol, and in there you'll see it's pre-populated, all the list of opportunities that we've added. So some have been filled in, some haven't. You can change the names of the opportunity on the board, and you can click on the pen in the opportunities drawer and you can add some detail to it. So you've got basic textual descriptions. Now, what I'd like to say is maybe over to Margaret. Margaret, if you look down that list, which of those opportunities, just for the purposes of simulation, appear to be more important than others? And can you just talk us through it whilst you move them?
Yeah, I would move collaboration quite high in the, I'm not quite sure how you do that, but from what I'm hearing, I'm hearing something that's about you really need to engage with people, managers and staff before you bring in a technical solution, because you don't know whether that technological solution, A, makes sense financially, or B, makes sense in terms of the way that they are going to respond to it.
Yeah.
And also, I think in terms of the collaboration, on the marketing side, you need a high degree of collaboration. I mean, what was striking me as I was looking at this, Martin, was how well it allows you to look at both macro and micro issues at the same time. So you're seeing the whole picture, and the whole picture is about the integration of people with systems and technology. And the micro level is how you do that at different detail parts. And I think the collaborative opportunity exists in all those micro spaces, but it also exists as a macro issue, which is a policy about how you actually introduce technology in to address any issue in a business. Yeah,
that's wonderful, Margaret. That's brilliant. You could write some of my marketing copy, I think, with words, with quotes like that. Macro and micro is a beautiful way of looking at it. So zooming in and then taking the helicopter view and looking out, and you'll see it does become more familiar as you use it more. but actually zooming in and out and guiding people to say, we're going to look at this particular area. It does require a little bit of dexterity, but if you're facilitating that, you can draw people's attention. And it's quite nice when the symbols get big because you just see a certain focus on screen. Now, another interesting thing happened, Margaret, when I think you said you don't know how to move the collaboration opportunity to the top. And I heard that and I wanted someone to help you out. So either someone helped you out or you found a way to do it. So did someone help Margaret out?
Somebody collaborated. Thank you.
Well, no, you see, and I don't want to overlabor these points, but it's really important when we run a simulation, we take the best bits. Margaret went in there and for whatever reason, you know, she was talking, she was in full flow and she just threw out a comment. I don't know how to do that. And it perked my ears up and I was interested. And then as we were talking, somebody picked up the 8 little dots and moved them to the top. Now, obviously we could, we're on time, so we're going to finish in a sec. If someone thought Margaret's view was it's actually about educating decision makers, then I would move up to there and you'll notice there are no controls or boundaries. There is no one saying you are not allowed to do that. So if I said to a Rachel or a Chris or a June and a June to say, you could have a real laugh with this. You could say, look, everybody move the opportunities in the order that they like. If I say that to you, if everyone makes 2 moves, watch what happens. If everyone just moves to, I'm going to make my 2 moves. I'm going to put functional tools to the bottom and I'm going to move it up. There will be no clashing. Things will just move in the list. And what you can do is you can run a conversation. I'm not saying which I like the best. It doesn't matter. It's a simulation. The fact is you can use that. And as you can see, it's all moving quite smoothly on screen. Imagine the fun that you can have with that. So you're going brainstorm in the left. It is a bit busy for this simulation, but you would do a little bit of tidying up in session and after session. You would create clusters of challenges. James and June and any supplier you're working with would then potentially add their opportunities to say, we can work with these opportunities in this area, and this is how we can help you. We know we can help you because you've told us what our challenges are, and these are the opportunities we can help with. It happens to be for technology today, but it could be for anything else. And then the wow factor, which the digital kit does better than the physical kit, is that it pre-populates the opportunities. So basically you're heading towards, if you're in a client-supplier relationship, you're heading towards a proposal to say, if what you've told me are your challenges are these, if the things we can help you with these, if the order of priorities are these to educate decision makers, but I feel inclined to put collaboration back so I don't upset anyone, I put collaboration back at the top, then you could then say, well, in the time we've got, we can create the conditions to pick off those first 2 or 3. And in 45 minutes or so, I think that is a fair simulation. We've certainly got enough content on the board. So thank you for everybody for playing along and putting that on. I think we've skimmed over the way we tell that story a little bit and tidy it up, but hopefully you can gain an insight into that. And for James and June of Digital Holistics, it's a way of when, you know, when I make available the information about what they do, this is potentially a blending of what they do as their skill set with an engaging, collaborative way of approaching it, which is why I'm interested, because that's the business and specialism I'm in. And then if James and June then go off with a bigger proposal and more of them, more clients because they've engaged the client better, then that's great for me, great for them. And it could be great for you as well in the way you gain insights into the way the business works of your clients. So